Perfect, thank you. All right, well, since it's 12:01, I want to go ahead and kick things off. So first off, I want to go over some of the OWHE education offerings that we've got coming up in the next month or so. So we do have another webinar after this one in May. So it's at the end of the month on May 28th. It'll be another new lunchtime webinar. It's actually a pretty timely topic on getting unstuck, uncover and overcome barriers to change by Heather Roberts, who uses she, her, hers pronouns. She actually presented this at the recent conference, and it was really a popular session. I was hearing about it throughout the conference about how it was a favorite all around. So I really hope you can join us for that one in May. And then if you have anything that you would like to present or knowledge that you would be happy to share with our community, I encourage you to submit a webinar proposal. It's a really safe space to kind of do your first if you've never done it before. And me and the committee are happy to provide you with any support. I know we're still looking for webinars for, I believe, June, July, and October. So just reach out and let us know. All the information and the proposal form is on the OWHE website. And then we do have an upcoming book discussion. So building off of the topic of Indigenous experiences, we had a chat about that a month or two ago. And then we're going to have this book discussion on There by Tommy Orange. So I encourage you to pick that book up and start reading so that we can chat about it together soon. All right, so next I want to introduce what we're talking about today. So we're going over how to create a great webinar. And so I'm Shannon Shivers. I'm the Director of Education for OWHE and also an academic advisor at OSU. And I use she, her, hers pronouns. And my expertise around webinars is primarily through facilitating for OWHE throughout the year. Erica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Curry, she, her, hers. I am the chair of the board for Oregon Women in Higher Ed. This is my last month as active chair, and then I'll be moving to past chair. I also recently left Oregon State University and took a new role with Oregon Association of Realtors as the education director. So that's who I am. I have given many a webinar over the years, and I worked for eCampus. So I spent a lot of time around best practices for online engaging adult learners and all of that.
Great, thank you. And Alex?
Hi there, I'm Alex Aljets. I am the Student Success Portfolio Manager with University Information and Technology at Oregon State University. I presented at OWHE last year and then successfully converted my in-person session that had a lot of interactivity and a panel into a webinar that we were able to do during the summer last year. And so my other experience with webinars has been being a frequent Zoom user in a lot of the roles I've had. Previously, I've had to collaborate with other universities and been using Zoom for 5 years now. And then more recently in my role, as we've transitioned to remote learning and remote work for many colleagues, been helping support the academic advising community at Oregon State with transitioning to remote advising and doing lots of things to help my colleagues out with that. I've also presented other workshops and done different work in that sense of using Zoom and other technologies to do engaging workshops for people even from a distance.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So to want to welcome all of you. Hopefully most everyone has joined us at this point. One of the things that I want to do is just kind of set some expectations around how this is going to work. So you started off with your audio on mute, and please stay on mute unless you're called upon or you have a specific question. It just makes things a little bit easier. And I would like to note that these guidelines are related to the platform that we're using. So we are using Zoom, but we're using it actually as a meeting rather than the official Zoom webinar function. The meetings work if, depending on your account and what you've purchased, they work for up to 100 or 300 participants, whereas the webinar format can accommodate a lot more folks. And it has kind of different settings defaulted, but because this is technically just a meeting, you have kind of a lot of flexibility in sharing your thoughts and your voice and your picture. So in this case, please keep that muted unless you're specifically trying to speak to the whole group. If you are comfortable, we encourage you to put your video on so that we can see you, connect, especially these days where we're not getting to see folks in person as much. It'd be great to get to know kind of what your world looks like. If you do get pulled away though, please turn off that video. And we encourage you to ask us questions throughout. Using the chat feature is a great way to kind of let us know that you have a question. And one of us will kind of facilitate that to make sure that we're able to address it. If you're having any technological issues or kind of technical questions, just private message to the OWHE in chat, and then we'll help you figure that out. And then lastly, I do want to note that with webinars, sometimes there can be disruptions. So personally, sometimes my internet goes out and the Zoom call gets dropped. The person still stays there, but I disappear for a little while. So to just kind of prepare for that, I've got the other two as co-hosts, but that is something that can come up if you don't have a strong connection. And then, you may have heard about unwanted guests popping into Zoom webinars. We have never had that trouble in OWHE, and I think part of that is because we do require that registration ahead of time, and then also we use the waiting room. So we've got some kind of management set up, some extra hoops, and the waiting room function also allows us to monitor and control who's entering and leaving through the webinar. All right, so this workshop kind of came to be out of an interest to provide more support to our members. For the conference presentations, we really encourage folks to translate that presentation to the webinar format so that we can reach folks all over the state, even if they couldn't come to the actual conference. So the learning goals we developed around this was to help you all understand the difference between in-person and webinar presentations, learn the best practices to capitalize on those differences to make a really strong and great webinar, and then to identify resources, tools, tips, and tricks to present a successful webinar. So that's what we're going to be tackling today. And to kind of start getting you engaged with that, Erica is going to lead some polling.
All right, thank you, Shannon. I will pass the membership manage and letting people in over to you. I've had folks throughout. Shannon, can you go ahead? Never mind, I found it. All right, so we're gonna start first by checking what folks' learning goals are. So I'm gonna launch a poll, and I'll be honest, this is my first time launching a poll in Zoom, so I appreciate your understanding, but hopefully this works as well as I planned. So you should all now see these questions. And the questions are, the first one is, what are your learning goals for this webinar? So go ahead and click the one that makes the most sense to you. I'm hoping to learn the basics for my first webinar. I'm hoping to learn intentional design practices. I believe on these you can select more than one. So go ahead and click the boxes for the ones that make great, somebody's already responded, perfect. And then how confident do you feel in presenting a webinar? And this helps us kind of get a sense of who's in the room and what our members are looking for by joining us today. All right, so I'm gonna let this go for probably another 20 seconds or so, but already I'm seeing we've got a wide range of what folks are hoping to gain from this, which is exciting, and I'm glad that we have all this content in here that's gonna meet those needs. I'm also seeing that we've got a nice wide range of confidence that folks are self-reporting, and it seems like we've got one person who feels really confident in what they're doing, and we've got a few folks who feel a little less confident. So I'm hoping by the end of this that everyone will feel more confident in their webinar presentation. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll now, and we can see, so the top answer is, I'm hoping to learn about new resources, tools, and tricks that I haven't already discovered, but there are 50% of our folks are hoping for information for their first webinar, which is really really good news for this session. So I'm gonna go ahead, oh, I have to share the results. Found it, here you all are. Now you can see the results. And I mean, this is about what we expected, and so this is great. Okay, so our next, we've got one more poll that I'm going to now share out. That is, I want to know a little bit, I want to dig into folks' webinar experience so we can see where folks are coming from in terms of experience hosting or viewing a webinar. I will say we have 0% for I've hosted multiple webinars, but never attended. So that's good news. All right, I'm gonna give you all about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll now, and I will share those results. So it looks like for the most part, we've had multiple people who attended multiple webinars but have never hosted. And we have about 3 folks who feel like their webinar, they've been hosting and attending regular webinars. I'm also welcome to whomever's first webinar this is. That's really exciting, and I'm glad you chose OWHE as your first webinar. And it looks like we've got a pretty diverse mattering of experience in terms of presenting in person as well. So that's really exciting. I'm gonna give you all some opportunities to share some of your thoughts about this, about webinars in a moment. So I'm excited to see, especially if you've hosted multiple times or even attended multiple times, I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. But as a first-time attendee, you're gonna have insights to it that the rest of us may overlook. So please jump in there as well. All right, so that is the polls function in Zoom. So our agenda for today, we're gonna start by talking about webinar opportunities and challenges. Then we're gonna talk about some strategies for audience engagement. Alex is gonna cover webinar logistics, some really important tips and tricks for getting yourself set up for success. Shannon and I are going to talk about self-care to prepare for your webinar. And then we want to spend plenty of time at the end to open it up for question and answer. So our goal is to at least have the last 40 minutes be, or 20 minutes, sorry, for question and answer. All right, so let's start with webinar opportunities and challenges. Webinars versus traditional presentations. Obviously, there's some significant differences between webinars and traditional presentations, but we want to hear from you. So tell us, no, go ahead, Shannon. No, you're great. That was great. Tell us what you see as the differences, benefits, and challenges of a webinar. And we'd love to have you share them either through the chat function, or you can there's a raise your hand feature in Zoom, and we will unmute you so you can go ahead and discuss. It is much harder to read the room in a webinar, and we're actually going to talk about that here in a minute. Lack of audience participation response. Yeah. Learning the technology, being confident. Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes folks are distracted in webinars. And one of the great benefits of a webinar is that you can be as engaged in getting the material or disengaged as you want, and do so without distracting the hosts, the presenters. But yeah, that definitely can be, developing rapport is very difficult. Yeah, it's hard, again, hard to read the room. You can't tell if folks are feeling engaged and paying attention or if they're losing attention. Networking and conversation at the end. Yeah, for sure. There isn't that hallway conversation that you can have. Yeah, troubleshooting is a great strategy for webinars. huge benefit in being able to record and view later or multiple times. Absolutely. Yeah, webinars really increase accessibility, which is one of my favorite parts about them. Oh yeah, absolutely. Lynn, I feel you very hard on that. As a fellow extrovert, I like rely on other people's energy to keep me going. And so I definitely understand that struggle. Yeah, there's going to be a lag in answers for sure. Great call, Tam. Yeah, small group discussions and share in pairs are definitely more difficult, but we do have some strategies for that as well. Yeah, and Whitney, accessibility, again, you don't have to travel. All right, I would love to encourage folks to keep responding, but we're gonna move to the next slide where I kind of summarize a lot of this. So you all really hit the nail on the head here. Some of the benefits of a webinar is you have a lot of ways to create engagement opportunities for folks. How many of you don't have to raise your hands, but just in your minds, assume that people are. When you're presenting in person, often a few people are the people who are comfortable enough, confident enough, and extroverted enough to raise their hand and speak up during a session. Whereas when you're doing something in a webinar format, more people can engage and feel it's less of a barrier to get involved in the conversation because you can just type it in chat and you've got that method. So there is more ways for folks to get involved in a more accessible format. You can also do things like polls and breakout rooms and other things like that to help create engagement opportunities that are different than in person. The reach and the access is huge in a webinar. Again, we have 38 participants. We are 38 people all in a room talking together during a time of social distancing. So that's really exciting. And as all of this is happening with COVID-19, webinars are becoming a really strong tool for access to gathering together. And then easy recordings. Some of the challenges are distractions, yours and theirs. I know I just had a ping from my inbox come in, so I'm getting emails and reminding myself that I'm focused. I have a small dog who's gonna jump in my lap at any point in time here. So just know that that's gonna happen. I had her locked in the garage for a while and didn't realize it, so I'm feeling guilty. Only one person can speak at a time when you're in a webinar. It's that kind of halts that conversational piece. And then technology barriers, I think folks mentioned that. And Jessa, I'm glad to know that your dog also joins meetings. That makes me really happy. There's a lot of barriers in terms of getting comfortable with Zoom, in terms of making sure the right meeting invite gets out, making sure people understand whether or not they're in the waiting room. And so we're gonna talk about some of the ways to kind of overcome some of these challenges. And in terms of like audience members being distracted, one of the things that helps me is these folks, or anyone who's joining a webinar has a full life going on. And by presenting a webinar in which they can be as engaged or disengaged as they want, now or as they're able, now they can be getting access to being part of this community, learning some of this information, chiming in when they have the capacity, but also can be doing other things. So in some ways it kind of lowers the barriers for other folks who are busy. All right, so does anybody have any follow-up thoughts on the benefits and challenges of a webinar that I didn't capture? I think one of the things is that lack of a hallway discussion space, and the networking afterwards is definitely something that I missed when I put these slides together. All right. Feel free to keep commenting in the chat, but we're going to talk about designing activities and materials and in-audience engagement for webinars. So we're going to start with a great theme, make an outline using images and visuals, prepping for file sharing, and creating an accessible presentation. So start with a great theme. For our theme, Shannon really loves pink, so we went for a pink theme for our slides. And I have found that the cherry blossom trees in my backyard have been, or actually they're just cherry trees, have literally been my saving grace and sanity through this time. And so they show new hope and brightness and happiness. And so I wanted to embed those in as well. So for this slide, we use a Google template and then just grab some photos from Pexels, and I'll talk about the sources in a minute, and just embedded them into the slides. But you can start with a great theme that's pre-built from places like Canva. Slides Carnival is one I use often. And one of the things to really recommend is more pictures, less text. So when you're looking for slide decks, think about slide decks that are going to kind of convey the theme of your message and the tone of your message well, and that are going to have, that you can use images that'll kind of follow that theme. So that's how you start with a great theme. The next thing that I really recommend doing is make an outline. I never really think I appreciated my like high school writing courses until I had to start working professionally and putting together presentations, because that, like, having your outline makes such a difference, especially if you're collaborating with other people. So draft your outline, and then that way you can move things around without trying to do it in your PowerPoint presentation. I highly recommend keeping it to one slide per or one topic per slide, because you don't want to overload people with information. And then you can also use scaffolding slides. So you saw the way that we're doing the agenda. We're bolding every time. We're keeping the agenda slide the same, bolding whatever topic we're on, so that audience members can follow along a lot easier. And that's what scaffolding slides are. And if you Google scaffolding slides, you can learn a lot more about how to use them even more elaborately than we did. And I think that that's definitely a good recommendation. And then vary your slide layout. So keep folks from, or to keep it from being super one note, by having lots of different slide formats. Again, picking a great theme helps with that. You're gonna have a more engaging presentation, just how you built it. All right, so using images and visuals. We have a bunch of sources. I have a bunch of sources that I go to for my stock photos. Upsplash is fantastic. Upsplash is really great for diverse people doing things. I've found that I really like their collections for that. I love Pexels for beautiful background imagery. I find a lot of great nature things on Pexels. And all of these are free to use, and they have the CCO, the open copyright, so that everyone can use them. Vice put together this gender spectrum. They collaborated with Broadly to create this gender spectrum collection, where you have folks, you have trans folks at work. And so I really like that collection for making sure that you have representative images. And then I also linked to, and all of this, there's a handout that we have. All of this is linked in the handout, so you'll be able to find all these. But like, I found an article that curated a lot of really different sources for diverse photos. Oh, actually, let's go back one more. One thing I wanted to mention that I don't have a PowerPoint on is data visualization. If you are going to be incorporating data visualization, I think I put it in the resources, but there is a great tool called DataViz Catalog that can help you find the visualization that tells what you're trying to convey best, and then also has links to different places that you can make them online. So that's super helpful as well. Okay, so think about ways to include your audience. Having folks explore and articulate their own assumptions before you share new information with them is a really powerful way to increase learning. And so make sure that you are keeping your, like, as you're designing your PowerPoint, be thinking of ways in which you can get your audience engaged, because no one wants to be spoken at the whole time, and we only can absorb so much information that way. You want to make sure people have a chance to kind of take this information and put it into their own mental scaffolding. So with that, in the chat or in the handout that Shannon provided, please list 3 to 5 accessibility considerations for webinars. What do you think are things that you need to keep in mind to create an accessible webinar? And I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to put all that in. Closed captioning, absolutely. Font legibility, yep. Color blindness, nice. Y'all are stealing my bullet points. Clear font without visual cluttering, clear articulation, closed captioning, call-in option, offer content in different formats, speed of information presented for sure. Okay, I'm going to give you all about 10 more seconds. Copy materials, yep. Recorded, All right. So, yes, those are all really great points. I think everyone took almost all of my bullet points. In this webinar slide deck, as well as in the handout, we've got links to, there's some different ways that you can incorporate captioning into Zoom. You can actually have participants typing captions as you go. You can also contract with a third party, as somebody mentioned earlier, to have real-time captioning embedded as well. Screen reader best practices. There's 4 webinars. I put a link in here to an entire website that helps you develop your screen reader accessibility and double check that in everything that you do. And then captioning in, and then colorblind testing. So somebody mentioned color blindness. There's actually a really good web tool that allows you to see things as folks who are colorblind do, so that you can make sure that everything that you're displaying shows up clearly. One of the things that I wanted to preface this all with is just creating space for folks to request the accommodations. If you don't have that, then it's hard for you to create an accessible webinar. One great way that you can also create a great also be really accessible is encouraging the whole authentic human to show up. One big thing about accessibility right now is that many of us have dogs and children and partners in home with us. And so by being able to say, it's fine if your dog shows up, it's fine if your children are here, we enjoy that. That helps create a more accessible webinar just at its baseline as well.
All right, so now we're going to go over some in-webinar engagement tools. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're doing a webinar is think about the facilitation. Set what those engagement expectations are up front. You know, webinar can, just like any other presentation, it can mean something where you're going to be expected to engage really actively, you know, take some reflections, do group discussions, things like that. Or you could do a webinar that's more just kind of lecture format where people won't be expected to engage. So things like that are important to express up front so that audience knows what to expect and how to engage and see if it's kind of meeting what they are looking for. It's also good to show questions on your slides if you're asking the audience. So making sure that folks are able to see it if their internet cuts out or they missed what you said. That's a little bit extra important for webinars. It's also important to consider breakpoints for questions. So again, when you don't have the ability to read the room and see looks of confusion, you kind of have to build in some pauses throughout to say, okay, where are we at? How are things going? You know, give people some time to reflect and respond. So that way you're not just kind of rushing along without your audience. Similarly, pause for reflection time. It can feel a little bit awkward when we're all just kind of sitting quietly at our computer, but it is still an important time for reflection. I know personally, I like doing going to workshops because they have that space set aside for you to reflect and really spend time on that topic. It's really hard for me to kind of motivate myself to do that on my own. And so I encourage you, even if you don't have that social pressure of seeing everybody else quietly writing notes, it still can be a really valuable portion of a webinar. And then we talked a little bit about how, you know, it's harder to do like think, pair, share and group conversations on webinars than it is in person. But Zoom, for instance, does have a breakout room function, which can allow you to discuss in small groups. It allows the facilitator to go around and join into various small groups to check in and share So that's a feature that you can use if you want to have more of that community discussion beyond just kind of chatting and things like that. And another note for kind of community engagement, so you'll see loading up here is the site Mentimeter. So this is kind of showing, scrolling along, people's responses to this question. So there are a lot of different tools you can use for audience engagement, feedback, asking questions, and this is a great one that allows you to follow along with the presentation on your phone. I like that feature alone just for the fact that it means I'm not distracted by my phone during a webinar. I have the presentation on my computer and I have my phone showing, going along with it. And when there's a question like the one there about what is your communication style, you can also kind of answer for the poll, and you can do anonymous things that you can type in on your phone. So it creates a lot of sense of community and a lot of engagement. So I really liked that feature. And this one was used on a recent OWHE webinar, Sorry Not Sorry, that was presented in the fall. So if you want to kind of see more about how that tool looks, you can check out our YouTube channel. We tried out the in-platform polling on Zoom earlier. And then you can also use things like Top Hat, Kahoot, and Poll Everywhere. And as Erica mentioned, that handout I shared a couple times in the chat has links to all of these tools that we're mentioning. All right, Alex.
Great. Excellent. So I'll jump in and talk a little bit about digital whiteboarding tools, because especially with a smaller webinar or perhaps a meeting with your team, there are times that you want everyone to be able to collaborate in a more detailed sense than you're able to capture in the chat, because that is one form of collaboration and engagement. But there are often times that you want to collaborate and have everyone be writing on a specific document together, and that is a great way to crowdsource new ideas and is a great resource to have for after your webinar that you can share. And so anytime you're wanting to collaborate and crowdsource, co-author and create something together, or also as another way to have different options for audience participation, digital whiteboarding can be a great tool. And so some tools for that, depending on kind of how fancy you want to get, Miro and Mural are both, they're essentially like a whiteboard that you, everyone logs into, and that you have like little post-its and you can add shapes and draw just like you would in a physical room together using a whiteboard. You can use pens, you have little digital post-its, that kind of thing. And then Google Drive and BoxNote are also great ways where many people can be in a document together and be adding. And so I've often used these in tandem with a presentation that I'm giving if I want people to be adding feedback to specific questions, and I will create these documents like in Google Drive or BoxNote, well, in any of these tools in advance, and then invite people by sharing the link in chat to go in and be collaborating in that document in real time. And so you'll want to be thinking about your audience though, and what tools they're most familiar with, and that they'll be most comfortable with. And a couple of those you might need to give them advance notice. They can set up an account, and all of those have free account options to set up in advance. So I'm going to kind of go into—
Alex, to interrupt real quick, we have a question. If I'm doing a talk and show a Miro or Mural screen, do all the attendees also need to have these loaded onto their computers?
Yeah, great question, Shannon. Thank you. And so if you want everyone to collaborate and be writing in the document, yes, you would need to have everyone logged in through their own account in a separate window. But you also could screen share that digital whiteboard for anyone who's not able to do that, or if you only want to have part of your audience collaborating and the other part just watching, those are both options. Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to go into some more kind of webinar logistics, and I want to share here the ingredients for a successful webinar. This is the kind of checklist that I go through in thinking about, do I have all the pieces together that I'm going to need? So in addition to your content, in addition to your audience engagement plans, there's also this whole piece of technology that we identified as very different in presenting a webinar versus an in-person presentation. And so this is an area that can be kind of stressful for people when they're transitioning from in-person presenting to a webinar. It's something that often is out of your control. And if it gets messed up, it can create a lot of anxiety or stress or frustration, and you may be concerned about some of these things ruining your webinar. And so I'm going to share kind of some general tips for these different things, and then I'm always thinking, what's my backup plan? Because like any situation, it can be disrupted by things outside your control. And so for each thing, you want to have a backup plan in mind, that if my video cuts out right now, what am I going to do? If my internet cuts out right now, what am I going to do? So having that in mind can help reduce the stress around presenting a webinar. So first, clear audio. Some tips for that is it's often really helpful to have headphones. And I found this tip to be really useful, especially when I'm presenting a webinar, because then the sounds that are coming out of your computer are not picked from other participants, are not picked back up in your microphone. And that's what creates some of that feedback. So I can hear y'all, but only in my headphone. And so it removes one less thing that can go wrong. Minimizing background noise, especially when you're presenting, is often helpful. If there's loud things going on in your environment, it's going to be hard to pick up your voice. Having everyone mute when they're not speaking, as we discussed in the engagement strategies, also helps minimize those issues when multiple people are speaking. It's often helpful to speak slower than usual, as we discussed, and to leave more pauses. It feels very awkward, but do those 7 seconds, like just wait. Wait for people to engage, whether it's verbally or in the chat. It's also helpful to test your audio and your microphone ahead of time. That's what we're doing as presenters before you all came in to the meeting today, is just checking everyone can hear each other and all the audio is clear. And then lastly, you always want that backup option. So 2 things you can do for when audio is not working. Most webinar platforms provide a call-in option, and you can just do all of your audio through your phone. And that's a great backup option, especially for the presenter. And second, you can use chat in a pinch, especially for participants. If their audio goes out, they can contribute via chat. And there's also the feature that, especially if you're maybe the presenter and you're using you're doing the slides, and your internet is slow or your audio is cutting out, you can call in via phone and join on your computer and use the computer to advance the slides and then be talking through it on your phone. So the next ingredient is strong internet. I kind of hinted at that there, because one of the reasons why your audio or video might go out is because of internet. When you're on campus in your workplace, try and use a wired connection whenever possible. You can also use an Ethernet cord even in your home to connect your computer to your router in your home. You'd be amazed how much a difference that makes versus using wireless. It's helpful to close any other things that are using the internet on your computer, whether that's, or also in your space and in your home, whether that's your phone that might be trying to download something, or other partners and children using the internet in your space, and but also things on your own computer. I've noticed a lot of differences with if I have Google Drive open, if I have Slack open, if I have any other like Teams, instant messaging. Those things take up a lot of internet bandwidth because they're constantly refreshing for new information. So turning everything that you can off is helpful. And if you're having issues with your internet, turning off your video is going to be kind of the first line of defense, because you can still be engaged even if people can't see you. And again, your backup is calling in. Third ingredient is having a human connection via video. Especially in these times where we're not getting to see as many of our colleagues face to face, it's really helpful to have a friendly face that you're able to connect with in your webinar. And so being welcoming and engaging and being present visually can be really helpful in that way. And things to think about with video is using a simple professional background, or in Zoom, they have the feature to have a virtual background as you see here. So that could be an option if your space is a little messy or you're not able to optimize what's behind you, where your computer is set up. It's also really helpful. You'd be amazed at the difference if you have light coming from the front rather than from behind you. I'm sure we've all video conferenced at some point now with someone that has a window behind them, and they look like a mysterious figure because they're dark. It's dark and you can't see their face, and there's all these shadows. So having, even if it's just a lamp that is in front of you, so you have the lamp, camera on your computer, and then yourself can help a lot. You'll definitely want to test your video when you're doing setup, and then your backup can be so that you can still get, even if you can't be on video, what are some things you can do to still have that engaging, welcoming presence? One might be only joining with video for the first introduction of your talk. That's one option. Also, you could include your profile photo on the beginning of your slide, so people at least know what you look like, even if and they have someone to kind of connect your voice with in their mind. And then also you can do, I'll demonstrate it right here. If you do turn off your video in Zoom and many other platforms, there's a way to set a profile image so that if I turn off my video, you still see me on there. And I can help identify who's speaking, and still people be able to see your face, even if it's a static image. And then the last ingredient here is thinking about your access to materials. And I think this is even more important, thinking about what your materials are in a webinar versus in more so than in an in-person workshop. Because when the webinar is finished, people still are going to want things to reference and to remind them of that experience and help them digest their learning afterwards. And you may need to have more materials or more comprehensive materials to help them do that, because being in a virtual environment is sometimes not as memorable as the time you went to a place and sat in a room and engaged with content. So first, consider whether you want participants to follow along with your materials during the webinar and versus being able to reference them later. So materials can be a distraction during the webinar, and we don't need one more of those, right? Or they can be really helpful, such as having prompts in the handouts that people are responding to or writing reflections next to during your webinar. It just matters how you design your presentation, which one of those makes more sense. So possible materials, you might share your slide deck, your slides, your PowerPoint presentation. Afterwards, you might share a handout of resources and links, like Shannon has shared a couple times in chat, and then we'll share again. And, or you might have a worksheet that you're having people write on or type in to respond to questions in real time. And then also sharing a recording of the webinar is very helpful for people to reference afterwards. So any of those options might be something you'd consider. And then also thinking through how you share materials. There's a lot of different ways to do so and to make sure everyone has access to them. You might link to them in a shared folder. You might upload them within the platform, like how we've been adding the handout to chat. You might use an in-the-moment link where if I wanted you all to reference something online right now, I could add the link in the chat and you'd click on it and open it up and kind of look at it in real time. You might also consider, if you're using that, to use a URL shortener in case someone needs to type in the link. Having it be one of those shortened like bit.ly URLs can be helpful there. And then also considering multiple methods, since some people may be able to access things in the moment, they might need it afterwards. I guess another method I'd add on there is sending it in a follow-up email with all of your different resources. If you are able to have a list, then that could, of people that participated, that can be great. All right, so those are the main ingredients. I also want to touch on here, if you're presenting with others, like co-presenters or panelists, you need to put a little bit more thought into your logistics and discuss technology, share tips, clarify who's doing what roles. You saw, like, between the three of us, we were talking through, like, oh, now you're going to be the person monitoring the chat and things like that. You also want extra time for transitioning between speakers. You want to have one slide deck so you're not futzing with different people trying to share and unshare and switching that around. And then lastly, when you have multiple presenters, it's even more important to do a test run. Turn it over to Shannon.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned, mostly my experiences with webinars has been as the facilitator. So I would recommend, if at all possible, you could have someone besides the main presenter who's willing to serve as that facilitator, who can introduce you, can help field question, let you know if something's come through on the chat, can provide any tech support if folks are having trouble, and can monitor the waiting room, be admitting people if their internet comes in and out and they need to be let in again. It's really nice to make it so that your main presenters aren't having to deal with any of that. So if you have a friend or a colleague who's willing to kind of be that support for you, I strongly recommend that. And I serve typically as that support for any of our webinar speakers that we have for OWHE. And then the other thing to think about is screen sharing and the host versus co-host. So right now we have it so that me, Erica, and Alex are all serving as co-hosts. This means that we all have the capability to let people in from the waiting room. We all have the capability to share our screens. And it also means that we have the capability to take over the screen share from someone else, which typically you would not be able to do unless you're in that host role. And then also, you know, checking in on who's doing the slide progression. So I'm doing the slide progression again because I'm taking more of that facilitator role, but that can also be a lot to juggle. So think about, you know, who's going to be doing that. All right, and then Erica is going to go over some self-care for us.
All right, thank you, Shannon. So I'm going to speed through this so we have time for questions, but I'm also going to try not to talk a mile a minute because that is definitely my default speed. So here we have some just basics for self-care for webinar presenters. One of the big ones is block the appropriate time. So if you're the only one presenting, give yourself the grace of 15 minutes to get into the Zoom meeting, deal with any technical issues, make sure you've got your beverage and everything set up prior to the start of the meeting. But if you're working with a group, 30 minutes works. So Shannon, Alex, and I have all presented multiple times before. We talked about our strategy, but we still got on about 30 minutes in advance to make sure we knew exactly who was doing what, to make sure we had all of our, all of those backup plans that Alex had referenced, making sure we had those in place to get going. And we used almost the whole 30 minutes. I still had time to make a bagel, but that's great. The next thing I'll highly recommend is have water or a beverage handy. That voice fry is real. And also in the time of COVID, coughing is very distracting. So highly recommend having some water handy. Reading the room is really difficult when you are in a webinar. And so I have a couple strategies to help with that. One is make sure that you have a few folks up and scroll to your gallery view so you have a few folks that you can focus on that are really engaged or that you recognize or that are giving you microfacial features. If you are a webinar attendee, I highly recommend having lots of facial features and nodding along, because if the presenter sees you, you're gonna make their day. And then if you don't want to get distracted by yourself, oh, the last thing I'll mention about that is you can also do gallery view, so you can see all of your presenters and have it on a separate desk or separate monitor. But there's a hide yourself feature. So if you get distracted by seeing yourself, either because it makes you really happy or it makes you feel awkward, feel free. There's a link in those slide decks so you can see how exactly to hide yourself in Zoom. And then I'm going to pass this over to Shannon.
All right, so of course, as with in person, it's really important to practice, but especially if you're doing a webinar, you want to get comfortable with the tools that you're using to facilitate. And the OWHE Education Committee is happy to help support you through that. So if you want to test audience, or you just want to, be able to play with a tool and have someone there to see how it works from the participant side, we are happy to provide that resource for you, and it is one that we encourage you to engage in if you plan to do a webinar. So we kind of got through everything. We've still got about 10 minutes and we might have a little time after if we need to. So what questions do you all have for the three of us? You can type your questions into the chat box as you have been doing, or again, you can use the raise hand feature to speak and show us all who you are and share your videos so we get some of that connection with you all. We'd love that as well. So go ahead and let us know if you have any questions. We'll take a few moments for you to think and type. All right, so do you have any tips for doing breakout rooms? I've never seen this. I'm trying to figure out the logistics. How do we know, people know which room to go to, etc. So I don't have a lot of experience doing it, but I have done some research on it and chatted with you know what room to go to because the facilitator will assign a specific room. So I believe that the facilitator really manages all of that, and they say how many participants are going to be in a room, and you can randomly assign or intentionally assign who's in what room, and then kind of pop into different ones. What are the advantages or disadvantages for recording a webinar and storing it as a resource versus a pre-recorded presentation? Do you have any thoughts on that, Alex or Erica?
I think a couple different things, and they're not mutually exclusive, you can do both. That you can record a webinar live and then post it as a recorded presentation afterwards. So I mean, different ones would work for different things that you might need. So if you want to help your participants have like a time that they're getting together, that could be helpful. If you want your participants to talk to each other at all, those are reasons to have a live webinar versus a pre-recorded presentation. If your goal is, any of your goals around community and sharing different perspectives among your participants, that'd be a good reason to have a live webinar. Pre-recorded would potentially be a better fit if you were sharing, kind of sharing information, and it was more, having more lecture style. But another consideration, and maybe a plus of the pre-recorded presentation, is if your participants are in multiple time zones and they might need to view the information at different times, that is a very good reason to have a pre-recorded webinar that people can view asynchronously, so not at the same time as each other.
And I would add too, if you're looking for more polish, pre-recorded is a lot easier to edit and go back and make changes or re-record. Whereas if you're looking for more in the moment connection with your attendees or like doing polls and that sort of thing, so having the group together is the benefit, then I would go for webinar. You're welcome, Tam. Thanks for
asking. And while folks are thinking about any more questions, I would like to share, just show you what that handout is that I have been passing out to you all. So it looks like this. So again, these are the templates for presentations that you can use. These are links to some of those accessibility resources. And then this is, some just guides on how to do a great webinar. If you just want, a quick refresher, also the data visualization that Erica had mentioned. And then each of these also links to the resources for inclusive photos that are free and available to use, the digital whiteboard tools and interactive response tools as well. And then we've got a question about how you do a poll.
Yeah.
Yeah, Erica, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, for sure. So to do a poll, first you have to go, before you start, you set up the poll before you ever start the meeting, is my number one thing that I want you to remember. But you go into your Zoom meeting settings, your Zoom settings, and you turn on the poll feature, and then you type in your questions and you say if it's multiple select or single select. And you can do like multiple questions at once, like you saw me do, or you can do a single question at a time. And you build those out in the specific meeting. So first you turn on the Zoom setting for your account, and then in the meeting, you select the polls tab and create the questions. And if you just Google polls in Zoom, there are a lot of really helpful guides on that. And
same goes if you decide, if you're not using Zoom, you can use Google or things like that. And again, you just set those up ahead of time, invite folks once they arrive to your webinar, and do the polling that way. Did you have something to add, Alex?
Yeah, I saw the other question about how to get the human touch of check-ins and kind of like who's in the room, like we do in in-person workshops, but in virtual settings and webinars. And a great one I've seen done that I'm planning to use at something coming up is using some of those collaboration tools to have everyone, like the digital whiteboarding tools as we've listed them here, to have everyone respond in real time to a question. Or to, you know, you can do some, and if you want to have it be more lighthearted, you could be like, you know, everyone add an image that says how you're feeling, or, you know, do kind of silly things like that in a shared document together. And that'd be a way to have everyone participate at once. There's also, if you do, especially in a smaller meeting, if you do need to do introductions, a tip that I've developed and done with groups is having one person call on, after you do your introduction, you call on someone else. So I would be like, I'm Alex, I'm from Oregon State. And then I'd be like, Shannon, and then Shannon would go, because that is a prime time for people interrupting each other, is doing introductions. And everyone, when you're in the gallery view, everyone is in a different order for different people. So there's no like clear going around the table. So having people call on each other for intros can fix that.
And I would say the Mentimeter tool is a great one for that as well, because it allows people to really easily type in answers or introductions or things like that. So that's, and you would do that with Zoom at the same time, so you could kind of have some options there as well.
And I would just add to that, because I think Alex's point about having someone call on you is a really great point. And because we do that for our OWHE like board meeting introductions, is we just, each person picks the next person, but also having like what questions you're expecting, like what pieces of information you're expecting folks to give listed on the screen at that time. So like your name, your pronouns, and your what institution you're from, or anything like that, is really helpful to make sure that's listed. And yes, the slides will absolutely be available after today.
And also, we had a question about the data visualization. Do either of you have any webinars that you've seen that people might be able to access to see how that was used effectively?
I can't think of any Alex, maybe, do you? I can't think of any webinars off the top of my head. I mean, the same way, like in any conference presentation that you've been to where folks do data visualization, like any way you embed it in your slides, there is some functionality for doing more like moving data viz when you're doing it in a webinar format. But that could also be a tech barrier. So I think just anywhere that you see good data visualization is a good example of how you would incorporate that. And if you want good data viz resources, go ahead and email me. I can share a few sources that I go to for like dissecting good data visualizations.
I'd say an added component in a webinar that might be a little different is just thinking about your font size. That you know, if you have a slide up, you're going to make sure your font is all at least like 18 point would be kind of a minimum. And data viz is an area where a lot of times things that you would, you know, copy over from Excel are going to be teeny tiny, and people are going to have a hard time viewing that.
Yeah, good point.
All right, well, I think that's all the questions that we've gotten. I think we addressed all of them, and we're just about at time. So if you do think of any other questions, the three of us are happy to answer them. On the OWHE website next to this webinar, it's got a link with our LinkedIn, I believe, but our email is also pretty accessible. And then I will be sending out an email probably either at the end of this week or sometime next week with the link to this as a YouTube video. So you'll get that in your email that you use to register, as well as an evaluation tool. So giving us any feedback to improve this presentation if we were to do it again, or in general for OWHE presentations for the future. It's really helpful if you can give that feedback. And then we'll also, again, send out that handout and a link to the slide. You can have those resources, play with all those links on your own as well. All right, well, thank you all, and thanks for joining us, and we hope to see some of your awesome webinars soon.
Thanks, everyone.